everybody, it's Strategy Gaming Dojo here, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. And today, I actually decided, hey, why not? Let's make a video of a game that I'm kind of playing off to the side as we do some of our other tutorials and stuff, but I'm having a blast playing it, and that is Twilight Struggle. Now, if you've never heard of Twilight Struggle before, I think it's generally considered one of the top five, in the top five, maybe top three, maybe top two with Gloomhaven. Best board games ever made. If you go to Board Game Geek, I think it's rated number two or number three of the greatest board games ever made. And that's really saying something, of course. And now they have ported it over to digital. I say now, I think it's been ported over for quite some time, but it's new to me. I actually never played the board game. And over Christmas time, there was a sale, and I said, Twilight Struggle, people have talked about what a great game that is, what a great board game it is. Why don't I pick that up? It was pretty cheap at the time. I think it was like $9.99 or something. And so I said, okay, great, I'm going to pick that up. Well, I just haven't gotten to it, haven't played it. But now I decided to install it and just give it a shot because I thought, well, I like these kind of board war game, ideas. I wanted to see if maybe it'd be appropriate for the channel. Maybe you guys would like it, and it's some kind of it's a recommendation I could make. I certainly can. I've absolutely loved it since installing this. I've got the main screen up here. Let's go look at the main playing board. So play offline. We're going to play the AI. We have no active games right now. The tutorial is actually pretty good. You know, I always hate to comment on tutorials because you guys are going to say, well, of course you don't like the tutorial. You want us to watch yours. I will say this, the tutorial is very good for right at the start. It kind of gives you an idea what happens on the first turn. It's just sort of incomplete. It only goes through your play in the first turn. Well, there are 10 turns for a game, and so there's a heck of a lot more to think about, but it does give you some of the basics. So, if you do want to download this or install it, buy it, and fire up the tutorial, you'll get a decent idea. Also, I'll say that the rule book, now the rule book is on two sides of the page. It's pretty fine print, but it's only about 12 or 13 pages long. I will say, as someone who is a professional rule book reader, it gives you an idea. And once you start to understand the game, you can go back to the rule book and say, oh, okay, I get this part. It's probably not something that you just pick up, read the rule book, and say, oh, well, I get it. It's the kind of game you're going to have to play because it is complex. But I will tell you, after a couple of hours playing, it's very intuitive. You start to really understand how the game works. Now I'm talking about the mechanics. As far as understanding how to win the game, that may be a whole different matter altogether. The AI in this game, from everything I can tell, and I've now been playing it, I think I played a total of about 10 hours. From everything I can tell, the AI in this game is really, really good. Now I've gotten to the point where I can beat the AI, but it is a struggle. And let me tell you, the first, 5 or 6 times that you play this, things are not so easy until you really understand every mechanic, kind of the idea of every card you play. So this is a card game and a dice game to some degree, but we're going to be the Americans here. The AI will be the Soviets. This is the Cold War. So it is a Cold War game starting right after World War II. So you only have two options. You're either the USA or the USSR. Soviets, Americans, 1980, hockey, let's get it on. It is a Cold War game, and what are you trying to do? Well, in a nutshell, what you're trying to do is control as many of these regions as you can to accumulate victory points. And the winner of the game is the person that gets to 20 plus 20. So this goes, from plus 19 to the Americans to plus 19 to the Soviets, and whoever can get to 20 first wins the game. And you may say, well, 20 doesn't sound like a whole lot. You know, there's a real ebb and flow to this game. Now, also, if the DEF CON level hits 1, everybody loses, but especially the person whose phasing action it was, they lose the game if DEF CON gets to 1 through certain actions of the game, and we'll talk about that. So, what are you seeing here? Um, you're seeing all these individual countries and they're grouped into regions. And so here you have Europe, and you can see them down here. Nice little touch. The old Eastern German camera here watching us play our game. You can zoom in on Europe, the Middle East, Asia, Central America, South America, and Africa. So those are the 6 major regions. There are 2 regions, Europe and Asia, that are also have a sub-region component. Now, just think about these as being the 6 major regions and what really kind of matters. But there are certain cards and certain points that matter based on which sub-region you're in. And you can tell in Asia, this kind of lighter color, this is Southeastern Asia, Southeast Asia. You can see it here. And for every region, you've got this, uh, this in its color and the name of it, and it shows you the ebb and flow. So here's the US influence, here's the Soviet influence as we start, and those will, move. They're kind of like a bar graph. They'll move and show you who's got more influence, more control in those areas. And so, you know, there are a lot of parts to this game. I really do believe if you spend an hour or two just trying to learn it, it will all become clear to you. As I said, it's a card and a dice game. Now you may be saying, well, you said, get control of these regions. How do you do that? Well, you do that through what are called influence points, and you can see some of them out here on the board in individual countries. And so while we do talk about regions, what that are important for scoring purposes, those are all based on these individual countries that make up the region. Okay, and so you've got all these countries, Spain and Portugal are kind of lumped together as one, France and Italy, Austria, Benelux, you've got Luxembourg over here along with Belgium, called Benelux. Okay, sure. West Germany, East Germany, you get it. So you've got all these countries here in Europe. And then what are these points? Well, you earn these points or you get these points by playing your cards and the cards in your deck. Okay? We'll get to that in a second, but let's talk about control. How do you get control of one of these countries? Well, let's look at Finland. Finland has a stability rating of 4. Okay, and that will never change throughout the game. That is always Those are always constant. So you see here the flag of Finland, the name Finland, and its stability rating of 4. You also see here it's got a slash through here. It's in Europe, but it's considered for game purposes to be in both Western Europe and Eastern Europe. It and Austria are the only two that are considered to be in both. Okay, but this is Eastern Europe over here, Western Europe over here. Um, I just pointed that out. You probably already knew that, but I'm just talking about game mechanics. Okay, the point here is the stability number, and you see every country has a stability number. It's the most important number in the game. And what does it tell you? It tells you how many influence points you need to have to control the country. So in Finland's case, you need to have 4 in here to control this country. But there's a twist. What if the US starts putting influence points in here as well and starts raising their score on the board? Well, to control Finland, even if you have 4, you need to have 4 more than the other side to control the country. And you can partially see it here. Now, we'll have to find a country. Is there a country where the US and USSR both start out with influence? I don't believe there is. So that's not very helpful. We'll just have to go right back up here. What you'll see here is in East Germany and Poland both, and this is just how the game starts. You have no control over this. But in these two countries, the amount of influence points that the Soviets have in these countries is more than three. And so they control, quote unquote, control these countries. And you can always tell because the darkened icon comes in here, the darkened numeral comes in here, and they have control. Likewise, the US has five in the UK, which matches its stability score and therefore it has influential control over the UK. All right, and you'll see here that it only has 2 points in Canada. In Canada, you need to have four to control it, so it's still white. So it'll be white and red when you have influence points in a country, but you just don't have control over it. And so when we start, it's really East Germany, Poland, the UK. That's kind of how the two sides start up, but you do have points out on the board. Also, when you first start, the US side gets 7 influence points that it can place anywhere that it wants in Europe. And this just gives the US player a little more flexibility about how they want to proceed in Europe. Do they want to kind of take the southern strategy and get more influence down here, or are we going to try to influence France or Italy? Now you'll see Italy, it only takes two to control Italy. So I generally always put two there. And another reason why I would do that, and something you may have noticed, is a lot of these countries have kind of a dark black background behind their name here. Uh, all of these do. All right. But then East Germany and Poland have red. And you may have said, well, that's just because they're controlled by the Soviet Union. No. It's the number that shows you that they have control. When it's red like this, so you see it's also in West Germany, France, Italy, those are called battleground countries. And battleground countries have an extra importance over just generic countries. And I do not mean to offend any Hungarians or Romanians, but in this game anyway, they are just a generic country. You still want to control it, it does benefit you, but ultimately these battlegrounds in red are more important for victory point purposes. And we'll get into that, but just keep that in mind that these are considered more important. And if we mouse out here, you can see over here by the US, Mexico's a battleground. Cuba, of course, is a battleground. Panama, Venezuela, Brazil. You can move around the map here and see which countries are considered battlegrounds. And that's really historically based. It's the kind of thing where these were countries where the Soviets and the Communist Party in these countries were trying to exert influence, and the U.S. Maybe overtly, maybe not, we're trying to counteract that in some way in this grand titanic struggle over control of the world. And so they are kind of the more hotspots. They also add a lot of flavor to the game because you get into these just huge battles of trying to get influence points into these battlegrounds. And so those countries, I'm loath to say they're more important. They are, but every country can have some importance to it. It's just these, for scoring purposes, really make a difference of how many points you get when points are totaled up. Okay? And so just looking around a little bit more, Yugoslavia, the Soviets have a point there. They have, a point in Syria. The U.S. has one in Israel. Now we'll be playing the U.S., so if I say us, I mean the U.S. player in this scenario. This AI, it will give you a beat down if you don't play well. Okay, so we've placed two in Italy. We've got five more that we can place. Now this is all just pre-game. Okay, this is like before the game even starts, you're just getting these 7 influence points so that you can really kind of dictate. And it also evens it up because the Soviets are starting with two battlegrounds here, excuse me, already under control. And so this just gives the Americans a little more fighting chance here in Europe, okay? And so let's put three down here in France. And now we have two battlegrounds, and the Soviets have two battlegrounds. And that's really kind of how you want to think about it for your balance of power in each region. How many battlegrounds do I control? How many battlegrounds does the AI control? Another reason why it's important where you place these is that at the start of your action round, okay, at the start of the turn, you can only place these little chits, these little influence points in places that you are next to, okay? And when we talk about next to, I don't want you to think geographically something has to be right next to something, okay? That's what all of these lines are. So the brown lines show you what is considered next to each other within the same region, and these red dotted lines show you things that are quote unquote next to each other for game purposes that are not in their region. So you see Algeria and France are considered next to each other. Why would that be? Well, because France used to control Algeria. I mean, I think that's probably the answer. But for game purposes, if let's take these out of France really fast. All right. So you can always hit back. The game will always ask you to confirm your moves before it moves on. Okay. And so I just hit back, and here we go. We've taken them out of Italy. It's taken them out of Italy, taken them out of France, and we have our seven influence back. If the game was like this, as we start our turn, we would not be able to place any influence points in Algeria unless it was just red on a card, but we would not be able to physically place them here because we don't have anything next to it. So we don't have anything in Morocco. There's a brown line here, or Tunisia, okay? Or if we back up, we don't have anything down here. And so in everything that touches Algeria, including France, we do not have anything in right now. So we could not place any points in Algeria. You have got to have influence in a country that is next to a country that you want to put influence into. All right. And so right now I'm looking, I guess, for Belgium really here. We don't have anything, as of right now. If we don't put anything in West Germany, let's say, or when you're first setting up here, this pregame, we could put one in. We can put it anywhere here in Western Europe. We don't need to be touching, but once the game starts, you've got to have someone that's quote unquote touching. Now you'll notice here, Canada is connected to Europe and even has the same color scheme. For purposes of the game, Canada is considered a part of Western Europe. Okay. You'll also see these dark black lines. You get extra points if you can control a country that is right next to the superpower. And so if you control Mexico or Cuba or Canada as the Soviet player, you're going to get extra points for that. For the US, if you control Romania, Finland, Afghanistan, and what's over here in Asia? Oh, North Korea. If you control one of those, you're going to get some extra benefits for that, some extra points. But let's go ahead and set our points here. And I like to put these in battlegrounds, of course, because it's just giving you free influence points. We might as well get control of things for free. And control is everything in this game. And you'll be fighting back and forth with the other player, whether human or AI, to get control of these places. All right. Now we've only got two left. Let's put one in West Germany because it is important. It's a battleground, but it's a four. It's hard to get a 4 point advantage, right? And so I didn't focus on this. I focused on France instead. And let's also put one down here in Turkey. Why is that? Because Turkey kind of gets us into the Middle East. As you can see, the dotted red line here allows us to connect to Syria. Now, Syria is also connected by Israel, but the AI, the Soviet AI, really comes after Israel, it seems often. And so you don't want to lose your connection to get points into the Middle East. All right. Grand big picture. Over here in Asia, you of course want to get South Korea and Japan. They're battlegrounds. They're very favorable to you as the allied player, as the US player, but it's easier said than done to get all the way to 4 points or 3 points. You know, you really want to kind of look at these 2 point battlegrounds, but then those are also very easily flipped. And so you may spend a lot of points to control Libya, and all of a sudden the Soviet player could just in one turn flip Libya, completely over on you. But as we get into the game and start playing it, you'll see those things. And so South Korea, Japan, up here, very important, of course. Now you, as the American player, already control Australia. All right. You also down in Africa, I don't think we control South Africa. We have a point down in South Africa. Nobody really has anything going on in South America. It's just not much happening. We do have 1 point in Panama, which is Central America. Okay. Um, and the Soviets do have cards that will help them come after Cuba. So we may want to get another point, so at least we have one battleground controlled here, and the Soviets don't get ahead of us in Central America. In Europe, you're going to be fighting over Italy, you're going to be fighting over some of these non-battleground countries as the Soviets try to, kind of force their way in here. If you get a really good turn of events, you may want to start trying to push against East Germany or even Poland if we can get over there to start, kind of putting pressure on the Soviet player to, have to defend its backyard and keep control here. All right. And as I said, we're going to start playing the game here in a minute. I just kind of want to give you the grand overview. Egypt and Libya, you'll be battling back and forth for these, as well as Iraq and Iran. The Soviets start with 1 point in Iraq. We start with 1 point in Iran. Okay, great. Um, and so, these are the real battle. They're called battlegrounds for a reason. Now, one thing I can tell you, just having played the game here for a little bit, Iran, Pakistan, India, so very vital and important. Try to grab a hold of those if you can. Okay, so the pregame is over. We have allocated the 7 points that are available to us to put into Western Europe. We put one into West Germany. We put one into Turkey, two into Italy, and three into France. Now we have two battlegrounds. The Soviets have two battlegrounds under control. You can see that here for Europe, kind of the balance of power here. And as we're done with that, we're going to hit that we're going to commit to this. Now, we could, if we change our minds, we could still hit undo. This is a turn-based and an action-based or a round-based game. So there's 10 turns to every game, and turns are the bigger feature. Okay, so there's going to be 10 turns. Each turn is made up of 6 or 7 rounds, potentially 8, but that we'll get into that later. But just think of it at the start when you're first starting the game that you're going to play 10 rounds, or I'm sorry, 10 turns of 6 rounds each. All right. And rounds in each round, you are going to play a card. And as you see right now, we have 8 cards. We were dealt out 8 cards, and we have those down here in our hand. This is our player hand. You can go see the discards, and you can see what cards were removed. All right. Now, let's go ahead and hit commit. And we see early war, 8 cards in your hand, 6 action rounds of turn one. All right. The Soviets also have 8 cards in their hand, 6 action rounds. The Soviets always go first. They always play first in the round, in the action round. Okay. It's just an advantage that they get. So we're going to go ahead and continue. And now we come to something called the headline phase. And at the headline phase, I get to stop and tell you about cards. And so you've got these cards, and these cards, you can left click on them, and they will tell you what the card is all about. So these cards in the first three rounds are going to be all the early war cards. Once you get to round four, then the game adds in what are called middle war cards, okay? And then once you get to round eight, the game adds in what are called late war cards, okay? And they just add um, every turn of the game is supposed to represent like 3 to 5 years. So early in the war, you've got things like Warsaw Pact formed, all right? The Arab-Israeli War, the Red Scare and these are all things that kind of happened earlier in the Cold War, right? As you get later on, you're going to have cards like Star Wars, when you get into the late game. And so what are supposed to represent like the 1980s, you'll start getting things that are a little more modern, all right? And that's how the game works. So early on, first three rounds, we only have early war cards. Every card has this up here. This is just an identification number. It's card number 17. It's essentially so you can make sure you have all your cards if you're playing the physical game. There are 110 cards total. All right. And early in the game, I think you have about 50 that are played, and then later on, more and more get added, but some also get taken off the board. And we'll talk about that in a second. So there are several features to the card. This up here, the red star, tells you this is a quote unquote Soviet card. What does that mean? It means that the actions down here, what what the game calls an event, is a Soviet event. It's generally means it's good for the Soviets, all right? Now it's in our hand, and so you have to play both offensively and defensively with your cards, okay? So this is in our hand, but it's what the game considers a Soviet card. Now let's go ahead and left click on this and send it back down into our deck, and we'll pull up this card. This is called Independent Reds, okay? This has a white and blue star. This is an American card. All right. So this is one of our cards. Generally, these events on the card are always going to favor us in some way. All right. So every card then is either a Soviet card or an American card, or there's a third type of card. Let's left click on that, put it back in our hand. And these two right here are what are called neutral cards. And you can see here, half of it's white, half of it's red. That just means it's not really good or bad for anyone necessarily. I mean, it could be. It really is just a card that you're playing. Well, let's just read this one. All further operations cards played by your opponent this turn are -1. All right. Well, yes, that benefits us because it's in our hand, but this could also be in the Soviet hand, and if they played it, it would benefit them. And that's really kind of what neutral cards are. They benefit whoever is playing them generally, right? But they could benefit both sides. Whereas, like an American card, if this gets played and this event gets triggered, and we'll talk about that in a second, it's going to help the U.S. add sufficient U.S. influence in either Yugoslavia, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, or Czechoslovakia to equal USSR influence. So you see what I mean? This is a positive for the Americans. And you can kind of look at the cards that way, but always read them. They'll tell you exactly, what could happen. And when I say what could happen, let's pull this one up again. So again, ID number American, because it's got the white and blue star. It's an early war card. Okay. What is this to? All right. So with every card that you have influence points in a number, and you see it here, 3, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 2. Those are influence points. All right. And then every card has an event section here. So let's just click off this and look at Warsaw Pact formed. Remove all U.S. influence from 4 countries in Eastern Europe, or add 5 USSR influence in Eastern Europe, so on and so forth. You can read these yourself. So you have influence points indicated here, and then you have events on the card. All right. Now there's a differentiation by whether we're playing our cards, neutral cards, or Soviet cards. Okay. When we play one of our cards, so let's say we wanted to play this card, we have to pick whether we want to use the points, the influence points, or if we want the event to happen. All right. And so you're going to read through this event and you're going to say, would I rather have this happen or would I rather bank these influence points and spend them on the board? And that's really how the game works. You use these points on your cards to put them on the board or to use them for other purposes. We'll talk about that. Or you have an event that happens that could benefit you more than getting these 2 points, let's say. All right. Now that's with your cards. That's with your cards. With neutral cards, it's the same thing. You get to pick, so your cards and neutral cards, you get to pick. Do I want these points? Now, of course, 4 points is a lot, right? It's one of the better cards in the deck. This one we would likely play for the points. But if you looked at this and it was the first card you're going to play, and you're like, wow, I would like to penalize the Soviets every single turn um, or every single round of this turn, they get a -1 of everything that they do. So when they play a card, if they played a 4 card, it would become a 3 card. If you think this benefits you more, you can pick to make the event fire. Now that's your cards and neutral cards. But let's talk about Soviet cards. When we play a Soviet card, okay, we automatically can use these 3 points, all right? But the event automatically happens. So when you're playing the other side's cards, you get the points and you can do something with them, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but automatically this event fires. And so if we played this card, we get 3 influence points to place on the board or to do other actions that we'll get into. But automatically, Warsaw Pact is formed. You remove all U.S. influence from 4 countries in Eastern Europe or add 5 USSR influence in Eastern Europe. So the Soviet player would get to decide. They can add no more than 2 per country. And if this is played, it also allows the playing of the NATO card. The NATO card could not be triggered before the Warsaw Pact is triggered. All right. But the game keeps track of that for you. It will tell you that. All right, so when you're playing the other side's cards, you have to be very careful that just because you're getting points to do things, you may actually be going backwards because what gets triggered. All right, so you have events, you have influence points, and again, Soviet cards, you always get the influence point, and the event always happens. Your cards, in this case the American cards or neutral cards, you can either pick the points or pick the events. All right. Now, the other thing here that you may be seeing is this asterisk. All right. If a card has an asterisk like this, if it is played and the event fires, all right, so we're playing it, it automatically fires. But let's say the Soviets played this card and they said, you know what, we want the points, all right, this does not fire then. All right. So all that would happen for this is this would go into the recycle pile. It will form back up the next time we deal out cards. It will still be active. But if the event fires, so we're playing it, it's automatically going to fire. This card is removed from the game. So any asterisk card, once the event happens on the card, it's removed from the game. Until it happens, it stays in the game to be shuffled and redealt out. All right. So, hopefully I didn't make that sound too complicated. The basic idea is if something has an asterisk, if the event happens, it's out. It's gone. That card is gone from the game. You can't form the Warsaw Pact twice. All right. Um, Okay, and so that's how that works. Now, if something does not have an asterisk, so let's say Olympic Games, and let's say we play this card, and rather than taking the points, we say we would rather have this event happen. And you can read what that does. It does not have an asterisk, so it just goes into the recycle pile. It may come up in a couple of turns again, and the Soviet player may play it, right? So if it does not have an asterisk, it can stay in the game. Okay, now there are a few other things before we actually start getting going here that I feel like you need to know, just kind of from a strategy perspective or whatnot. And that is that there is a DEF CON level up here. Certain events cause that DEF CON level to march downwards. All right. And so that becomes important, and you'll see why as we play. You also have these things called military operations, and for every uh, turn, so turn is here, it'll show you the round here. For every turn, you have got to do so many military operations. Now, it doesn't matter what round that's in, and we'll get into what that is, but you essentially have to try to instigate coups, you have to try to overthrow governments, you have to take some kind of, positive military action, and that keeps the game kind of fresh and lively. Instead of you just getting points and putting them on the board here, this causes you to, go out and really think, okay, what government am I going to try to overthrow and automatically get points in that country? Okay, so this is military operations, DEF CON. They sort of work together, and we'll get into that. Again, here is your score. And like I said, it runs from positive 19, which will be blue in our favor, all the way down to negative 19 in red if the Soviets are ahead. And the minute anybody gets to 20, they win. Or anybody that triggers a DEF CON 1, they lose. All right. Then you have this kind of oddball mechanic over here. I do like it, but it's called the space race. And this space race, now you can get points. This is how many victory points the first person to get there gets, and how many victory points the second player to get there gets. So if you get here first, you get two, and then if the Soviets do, they'll get one, and so on and so forth. And we'll get into this. I always think of this: do not play this game for the space race as far as like your strategy. This really is kind of where you discard cards that you don't want to trigger the events, because if you use a card for the space race, the event will not trigger. So if you have a really good Soviet card, let's say here, let me hit this again. De Gaulle leads France. Remove 2 US influence in France, add 1 USSR influence, and it cancels the effects of NATO for France. Well, this is a terrible card for us, right? So we could play this, we could get the 3 points, but if we did, the all of these bad things happen. This is the kind of thing you may want to play on the space race, and I'll show you how to do that, because if we play it for the space race, it's the only way to play a Soviet card where the event does not happen. One last thing I want to say about events is that when you do play a Soviet card, you get to pick, do you want the event to happen before or after you spend the points? And so if we played this, we could spend 3 points and then the event happens, or we could say, nope, we want the event to happen, and then we take all 3 points and put them right back into France. You see what I'm saying? So there's a little bit of strategery, I guess I'll say, about when you play the other side's cards, who you get to decide which happens first, the points or the event. All right. And with that, there is only one more twist. Well, that's not true. You know that's not true, but just one more little twist. And that is that every turn, so this is turn one, starts with what is called a headline. This precedes the rounds. So early on, there are 6 rounds per turn. All right. But the first thing that happens is what's called a headline event, and you get to pick that. Now, the thing to remember about headline events, so we're going to pick a card, the Soviets are going to pick a card. Okay, it's going to be face down. Now, if you're playing on a board, it would be face down, and we turn them over at the same time. The thing to remember about the headline phase, the first thing, this is before every turn, there's a headline phase, is that forget in some respects about the points. You do not get to spend these influence points. Instead, the only thing that happens is the event. All right. So the only thing that happens is the event on the card. Um, and that leads to some interesting decisions, right? Because you don't really want to play the high point cards because you want to save those to spend the points, right? You also don't want to, play a good card for the Soviets because, well, the event is automatically going to fire. And so I find that there's two different kinds of cards that you want to play in the headline phase, either cards that are of a very low point value. Now, we do not have any number ones in here. They go one, two, three, and four generally. We do not have any ones in here, unfortunately, because that would kind of be what we usually would play in the headline phase. So instead, we're going to have to look for something that is a good event that kind of outweighs the point total. So let's look at Olympic Games. Player sponsors Olympics. Opponent may participate or boycott. Okay, and that's why this is a neutral card, right? It just kind of matters who's holding it. If opponent participates in the Olympics, each player rolls one die. With the sponsor, that would be us in this case, we're playing the card, adding two to our roll. High roll gets 2 victory points. Well, hey, that's pretty good, right? If we re-roll ties, now we are getting a +2 bonus on this roll. If the opponent just says, nope, we're boycotting your Olympics, degrade the DEF CON 1 level. That would make DEF CON go from 5 to 4. And the sponsor may conduct operations as if they played a 4 card. So we would get 4 influence points for this one if they decide to boycott. So really, this is great. We get a +2 dice roll. If we win that dice roll, we get 2 of the 20 victory points we need. If the Soviets say, hey, no, we're not going to play along, we get the equivalent of a 4. They call these ops, operations. That's what these are. They're really influence points, operations. Okay. And so let's play this one. Let's make this our headline card. And so you can left click and hold on the card and pull it up here, and it will tell you exactly how you can play every card. So if you pull a card up here, it will show you all of your different options. Well, in the headline phase, we've only got one option, and that's to play as our headline card. Now, this is good because it could potentially give us victory points, it could potentially give us influence points, and it's only worth 2 of those operation points normally, so it's not one of our better cards. All right, those kind of give you relative value, um, really based on the influence. But let's play that. So we played ours. Now the AI is playing theirs. All right. So Comecon, let's look at their card here. Add 1 USSR influence in each of the 4 non-US controlled countries in Eastern Europe. Now their card is a 3, ours is a 2, so they get to go first. Their action goes first, and you can see their chits, they move them out. They put 1 in East Germany, 1 in Finland, and I think 1 in Yugoslavia. And if you saw the card, we can go look at that card again if you want and talk about what happened. This is what the Soviets played. All right. They played Comecon, uh, the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance. This is one of their cards. This is something they formed historically. This does have an asterisk. And so now that this has happened, this is out of the game. And you can see here, removed. Okay, so add 1 USSR influence in each of the 4 non-US controlled countries in Eastern Europe. All right, so we'll do that. Oh, it already rolled. It already rolled our Olympic roll, damn it. I was on a roll. No, yeah, the pun was definitely intended there. I was on a roll talking about this. We'll get back to this in 1 second. Let's stay on Comecon for a second. They played it. It was a headline play. It was, you see here, It's the headline round. So they don't have any choice. They could not use these 3 points. Instead, they have to do what the card says. And so, this is a good choice for them, right? Because they get 4 influence points essentially instead of the 3 that the card number would have given them. Um, all right, now let's remember. Remember, we had a +2 because we were the sponsor. We both rolled 5 for these Olympics. Uh, so the Soviets did agree to participate in our Olympic Games, but we won the roll. USA wins. When I click off this, we're going to watch 2 victory points float up to the scoreboard, and man, that's fun. All right. And so with this card here, the Soviets then, oh, they put them, I think, in Bulgaria, Yugoslavia. It was the 4 that we have no control in Eastern Europe. Okay. And so that's what they did with their Comecon card. All right. So now we've played the headline phase. Now we get into the action rounds. And it'll always tell you here turn one, round one. 6 rounds remaining. That's including this round one. There will be 6 rounds total. So round one, 0 mil ops points. All right, we'll get into that. And or the Soviet player needs 5 of them. Now, why is that? Well, here's military ops, here's DEF CON as a general rule, and let's talk generally because, of course, there's always some times when it's not 100% true based on cards that you get. But as a general rule, whatever the DEF CON level is, all right, for uh, by the time that you get to the end of the turn, and by the time we play 6 action rounds, this may be all the way down to 2, it may be 3, it may be 4, whatever the case may be, you, uh, I say you as the Americans, ours are all yellow now because we have not done any military operations. Theirs are all kind of grayed out because they have not done any. But you as a player need to have done enough military operations points to match the DEF CON level. So if the DEF CON level is 2, you should have done 2 military operation points. I was going to say military operations, but you may get both points doing the same one. All right. If you do not, how many ever you're light, so let's say the DEF CON stayed at 5 and we only end up doing 2, you lose that many victory points. We would lose 3 victory points for not doing enough military operations. And again, that will be calculated at the end of round 6. So at the end of turn 1, round 6, we need to have done enough military operations to match the DEF CON level. Okay? All right, so the Soviets are going to do their action round, which means they're going to play a card. Now, it might be one of our cards that's in their hand. It may be one of their cards. They may decide to take the points and use the points, or they may decide to take the event. It just kind of depends. Okay, and of course they play the China card, the infamous China card. And we'll go look at this in a second. Military coup in the Philippines, that the Soviets decided to do a military coup in the Philippines. It was successful. They rolled a 5. Okay. DEFCON status remains at 5. Oh my goodness, there's a lot to get into here. And I will get into that next time because this is one of the fun parts of the game is running coups in different countries. So instead of spending your points to up your influence naturally by just putting the points down, you can actually run a coup and based on your dice roll, you can, X out our point. This was the American 1 point of influence we had in the Philippines, and now the Soviets have 5 points. And we will get into all of that next time. I think I'm just going to play this game through. It'll probably take me like 2 or 3 episodes, at least, the first 4 or 5 rounds, so you get the flavor of the game. I just thought this was fun. I've been playing the game. I did not plan to do a tutorial on this, but I think a lot of you would really enjoy this game if you give it a chance because it's a really great game, a lot of fun. Like I said, one of the highest rated board games of all time. I meant to just kind of mess around with it for an hour or so. Here we are 10 or 15 hours later, still loving the game, learning things about it. Very, very good strategy game. So, anyway, this has been Strategy Gaming Dojo. Like I said, I guess this is going to be 2 or 3 episodes now. And so, hopefully, you enjoyed this and you will come back for the second one. And I'll talk to you next time.